Welcome to the Business with Beers podcast. This is the place where we help entrepreneurs expand their business, build their wealth, and generate passive income. I'm your host, Brian Beers, an entrepreneur who's on a mission to inspire growth from everyone around me. Remember that you need to take the actions others won't, and you can live the life that others don't. Please be sure to check out my weekly newsletter that now drops every Thursday. It includes one quote, one tweet, one podcast recommendation, plus some business and investing insight from me. It's short and it's sweet. My goal is to provide you with just a couple gold nuggets to help inspire your growth. Go to brianbeers.com to subscribe. Hello, everyone. I'm excited today to bring you David Barr. David is a legend in the franchise industry. Here's a snapshot of his resume. As a franchisee, his ownership or advisory board role as the franchisee of Domino's China, which has over 780 units. He's telling me they open up a new unit every 36 hours. It's crazy. 39 Taco Bell, KFCs, almost 90 Outback Steakhouses. As a franchisor, he's a partner in a franchise development company, board of directors of Dogtopia, College Hunks, Hauling Junk, Capriatas, and more. He's also an investor in Rolling Suds. He's also the past chairman of the International Franchise Association, which is the premier franchise lobbying group in the country. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
And I know there's a whole lot more of that resume, but we don't have an hour to go all through it.
So I'm just blessed to be part of this wonderful industry.
Yeah, so you've been franchising almost your entire life, looking at your LinkedIn there. So my first question is, what is the greatest business model in the world, and why is it franchising?
Well, you of course led the witness here. I do believe franchising is the greatest business model. One, it's the greatest democratization of wealth. I think of any business model. Those individuals who are willing to work hard, put their blood, sweat, and tears, don't necessarily have to have that embryo idea that some entrepreneurs have, but find a business model that they can be passionate about and drive that business model to success. So Charlie Chase, another past chair of IFA, oftentimes says it's the greatest democratization of wealth, and I certainly agree with him. In addition to that, and maybe in conjunction with that, I would say, I think of the ladders of our society that one can move up. There are franchises today that someone can buy for $100,000 and create EBITDA and really work themselves up the ladder. And there are many success stories within franchising of how that's been accomplished. That's on the franchisee side. On the franchisor side, there are people who have wonderful ideas, don't have the capital to expand, don't have the people to expand, and are able to do franchising as an expansion of a brand that maybe can touch lives throughout America or throughout the world. And so franchising's just been the platform that I've used to advance my career and my dreams. And I think it can do it for others.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. I mean, I think, a couple things that I think about and we talk about is there's this huge spectrum in franchising, right? A lot of people think what you do, right? Or you currently do with Taco Bell and Wendy's and Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's. And they think it's these huge investments that you need to be a millionaire to get into it. They don't know that, you can start up this, if for $100,000, you can get into a lot of great, home service brands. And then even those concepts can be scaled, and then you can make that big, or maybe you want to step up into one of these larger investments. But there's a full spectrum there. It's not super high end. It's not, chucking a truck, you buy yourself a job.
Correct. There are about 3,200 franchisors in America today that file FDDs actively. Approximately 60% of that is restaurants and hospitality. So that'd be restaurants, hotels, which really means 40% is outside of that. 40% is services in large part. And that is split almost 20% residential and 20% commercial. Some of those do require significant capital. Most do not.
Yep. So I'm sure people ask you this all the time, but why not create your own brand, right? Why not you be the franchisor and why do you need them with all your experience? Do you get that question? Have you gone down that road in the past, or have you thought about it? And how do you think about that?
I have. And, I guess I embrace who I am. There are different types of entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs who are creative, visionary, think of what's the art of the possible. Think of, does the world need this? I will admit that's not my gift. My gift is taking a business model and driving it through execution to hopefully its perfection. Or said another way, maybe I know how to copy really well. I'm willing to look at an idea that's happening somewhere else and say, hey, I think this is applicable here, and we should use that to execute. That is the nature of franchising.
Yep.
And so really early on in my life, I think, going all the way back to childhood, I always thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And as I advanced my career, first through accounting, then finance at PepsiCo, and then as CEO of Great American Cookies, as I came out of that, I had experienced as franchisor team member the benefits of franchising. And I thought, wow, how do I go become an entrepreneur? And I didn't have a great creative idea in 1998. If I had, I would have run with that dream, but I didn't. But I did think, I know how this business model works. I can go find business models that I can run well and execute on, and they can fulfill those dreams of being an entrepreneur.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And that's the same thing I've felt as well. It's like my skill is like, show me the playbook of how to make money. And then I can go out and like run the playbook. I can hire the people, I can train them. But like, honestly, like I don't want to like create a brand or run marketing or like, I don't know, all the other stuff that has to go involved, right? It's like that, like that's not my skill set. It's, it's operation, it's sales, it's like team building. I think for a lot of people, like that's what you learn probably in corporate America as CEO, like big team builder, right? And how do we set this vision and go versus having to create all this other stuff to support it, right?
Right, Brian. And exactly to that point, the first business that I started as a franchisee is PMTD Restaurants, which stands for People Make the Difference. Okay. Because fundamentally, I think what I wanted to bring to the table was what I'll call culture leadership. So it wasn't about bringing visionary leadership around, let's go create a brand or let's fulfill a need that the customers never knew they needed. But instead, how do I get a group of people and do really what's impossible work or great execution as a team? And in that regard, I think what attracts me to being an entrepreneur is really the leadership of people.
Yep. So that was KFC, right? Primarily?
Yeah. So in 1998, at the age of 34, I had sold Great American Cookies as a CEO on behalf of a private equity firm called Jordan Company. I was blessed to work for them because they rewarded me for the efforts we did at Great American Cookies. So I took some of the equity from that and bought 2 KFCs in Alex City, Alabama, and Talladega, Alabama. Those 2, in large part, have now built the other 39 because we were able to take the equity and just keep rolling it. And so many of the investments I have today really came out of that first investment of two KFCs in Alabama.
Okay. Yeah. Mine's similar. We were like a family business. My dad had, 6 or so, and I was an employee, and, I wanted to make more money. My brother and I got a loan. We bought two franchisees out, or one franchisee, 2 locations. And then we just rolled that money. Like all the money we made on those 2, we used to fund another one in 17, another 2 in 18, another one in 19, a group of 7 in Jersey. And anyway, today it's 33, and we own, we bought our parents out. But it was this concept of like, let's just continue to reinvest our money back into our business. We had deals that we put $50,000 down to buy an existing one and seller finance the rest. And, we made like, I don't know, $400,000 that year off that store. Like we 4X'd what he was making. So we had an 800% return on our $50,000. Like where you can't get that anywhere else, right? No. It's betting on yourself and your process, and that's how you can accelerate this thing. Is that kind of similar? You just roll profits into.
So of the 39, we've acquired 36. We've only built new 3. And that same funding is what produced the Capriati's, both the investment in the franchisor as well as the franchisee. So it really all started with just 2 KFCs and us saying we're just going to execute this better than anyone else. One of the reasons we actually love small towns for our KFC and Taco Bells is that we don't think we get lost in the sea of sameness. So execution matters. So when we're in small towns of America, and our management teams execute better than others along that street, we win.
Okay.
Very
So you gain
different,
more market share versus
very
being a
different.
big city with like
Right.
every single competitor in a stone throw away.
Yes, and you don't get the relationships really. The relationships in these small towns matter, and so we see a quicker uptick given our operational ability in those small towns than we do in the cities.
So what's the so I assume you have like a regional director that will oversee multiple locations. How many can they oversee? Like roughly?
Yeah, so we have. I actually have an operating partner, Bill Bird. I couldn't do what I do without him.
Yep.
He's the president of the restaurant group, so the KFC, Taco Bells, and the Capriottis. He does that day in and day out. He's very field oriented. We believe that leadership needs to be in the field. He then has 6 individuals that report to him. So they have a span of a little over 6 restaurants per person. And I think that's typical in the restaurant space.
Yeah,
sometimes you see people expand the span of control, some less. We think that's kind of the sweet spot, especially in today's labor market. I will say when I first got in this business 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have the turnover in this industry that we have today, and we could have a little bigger span of control.
Yep.
But there's so much about recruiting nowadays for these director of operations or area coaches, depending on what you call it, that you need to have that. I would make one suggestion maybe for some of the listeners that are franchisees. I tend to think of you don't want your field ops to be much more than 2.5% to 3% of revenue. And I get that question a lot as to what should your field ops be? And I say that because if you're in a concept that has lower EBITDA per unit, then by definition, you almost need a bigger span of control to absorb
to dilute it down.
Yeah. So our average restaurant does about $1.1 million. So 6 units, call it $6 million. At 2%, right? That's 120,000.
Yep.
That can go towards that type of area coach, fully loaded salary and benefits.
Okay, that makes sense. So, restaurants are notorious one of the toughest businesses to run, right? Turnover, you've got food that goes bad. So like it's cost of goods can get out of control. But on the other hand, in the franchise world, fast food is like the most scalable model. It appears, at least. You've got major franchisees, hundreds of locations. You got the Flynn with 2,400. Like,
yes.
So how is that kind of possible? You have like one of the toughest business, but also on the other hand, one of the most scalable businesses. Like how do you think that happens?
I think if you think from franchising, what do those franchisees or management teams within those restaurants need to do? What they really need to do is just fulfill really well. So if you compare it, for instance, to Midas, maybe as an example, there is both a sales arm to Midas. Midas has a brand that actually customers come to it, but there are referral sources that you work up and down the street. So there are some businesses where you have a sales component.
Yep.
And then you have an estimating component. Here's what we think it's going to cost to fix your car. Yep. And then you have a fulfillment.
Yep.
In the food business, all we really have to do is worry about fulfillment.
So one of the 3.
Yes. And so if you think of KFC or Taco Bell, both brands spending over $140 million in TV advertising, they're pushing customers to us. There's no estimation of what an order is going to cost.
All they have to chicken sandwich should cost.
So all they have to do is fulfill. And there are people that you can train, therefore, to do just that and do it really well and focus on that. And therefore, I think the scalability of that model, while difficult, it becomes easier because you don't have that single point of failure of that manager that if they don't know how to achieve sales or they don't know how to achieve estimations, that you can, in fact, control the business.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I've always thought it was like we're in the people business. We just happen to fix cars. And like, if we don't have good people, if we don't have a good manager, if we don't have a good technician, like we can't fix the car right, we can't estimate it right, we can't sell it right. Like our business literally could double overnight if we have a really good team, or it could drop in half overnight if we lose the good team. Yeah. In the food business, it seems like it's the end product. If the product at the end tastes the same, right? that really becomes, and then they had a good experience because the product is consistent.
Yeah,
That's the expectation.
to some degree, I think fast food in America has been dumbed down, unfortunately. The truth is, if you pull up to a restaurant, 80% of most fast food today is drive-through or carry-out.
Okay,
so it's off premise. But if you pull up and the area is clean, it gives you a sense of cleanliness.
Yep.
And if you get your hot food hot and your cold food cold, and you get it in a relatively fast manner, you're happy, right?
Yep.
Now, if they throw in a smile, you're ecstatic. And therefore lies the difference with really Chick-fil-A, who I really admire, right?
Yep.
So average fast food restaurants generally about $1 to $3 million, depending on the brand. Chick-fil-A is sitting at $6 million average unit volume. And it's really about the people and how they can provide that additional bit of service beyond what the customer expectation is, which is really, I just want hot food hot, fat, cold food cold, and I want it fast.
Yep. So how do you determine kind of what brands are you going to, as a franchisee, that you want to kind of partner in? Like, are there other fast food brands in your restaurant business you think you can go into, or, kind of how do you think through that in terms of on the operation side of it?
Yeah. I would say I did a matrix at the very beginning in 1998 of what brands might I want to be in. Because I had come out of cookies where our average ticket was $1.80.
It's something a little higher.
I said, one of the things I want is a higher ticket. So KFC within the fast food world is one of the higher tickets. The second thing I wanted was the ability to be in small towns. That was important to me. Third, I wanted to be able to own the real estate in the brand. There are some brands that's more difficult. Yep. Fourth, I wanted a brand that I could highly leverage from a financing standpoint to make my capital go further.
So the banks liked or were comfortable with.
And they are what in the restaurant industry we call tier one. Yep. Those are those brands that the banks just have enough history with that they say this is a good risk. And they know that if by chance someone fails, there's enough other franchisees to buy up those brands that collateral is still worth something. So that was really my matrix. And I came out of that with about 5 or 6 brands. I approached all those brands, started looking at where I could buy, and KFC just popped to the forefront. Spent my time there really for the next 15 years. We then expanded into Taco Bell, which of course is part of the Yum Brands umbrella. Yep. And then from there really began saying, how can I make these investments and leverage my capital even more within a franchisor? And that was through my work at IFA that I was able to meet a lot of franchisors. So I invested a significant amount of capital for me into Capriotti's franchisor, believed in the brand so much that became a franchisee at the same time with that brand.
Yep. That's great. And then, so what are some of the other, like how small are these towns? You say small towns, what's that look like? Population, or does it, how do you determine that?
Yeah. So another way I've said it is we always want to own the donut, not the whole. So if you think of Atlanta, Georgia, where we're based, is the whole of the donut. Yep. We always want to own the ring. And we do that because I find urban cities, very difficult from a labor standpoint and cost of real estate. Yeah. Suburban within the KFC system, suburban also hard to find labor. But I would also say that the KFC brand and Taco Bell brand at times in suburban markets are difficult to grow. The consumer base just doesn't gravitate towards that as much as what I'll call small town Southeast America. So the towns that we're in, the smallest would be probably Pine Mountain, Georgia, which is just outside of Callaway Gardens. We have a strip center location. It doesn't have a drive-through. And I would bet that town's less than 5,000 people.
Oh, wow.
But it does have a significant number of visitors. Alex City, Alabama is a small town that sits between Auburn, Alabama, and Birmingham on 280. It's a lake town where fishermen come and fish. And it's an old textile mill town. So again, kind of what many would say a sleepy Southern Alabama town, but In those towns, we oftentimes do over $1 million, and we can get great stable management and be part of the community.
And then you either own the real estate or have really good lease in a strip center or whatever. And so you probably have better margins there than net margins and maybe some other ones.
Correct. Well, of the 39, we own the real estate in over 30 of them.
Oh, wow.
Which is unusual for most fast food folks. But we do that because we see a kind of, again, a leveraging of capital.
Yeah.
As we think through personal net worth, there's a real value to that over time. It's interesting when I get called by private equity shops to go in and work on some of their franchise brands. From a finance technical standpoint, you almost immediately sale lease back the real estate.
Yeah.
You sell the real estate, you use that capital, you pay down debt. That is the right finance answer generally, if you think of cost of capital.
Yep.
But if you think of a franchisee, an individual who's trying to build family wealth, I believe real estate is a great portion of that franchise holdings. And great to have in the long-term holdings.
Yeah. In the Midas system, one of the largest franchisees started in the 50s. I think one of the first groups, and they built every single building. So mainly ground up development. So they became like a real estate company, over 100 locations. They own the dirt on almost all of them. Eventually they did an ESOP and sold it to the employees and whatever. But tons of hundreds of millions of dollars of value created in building these, and very similar. Some of these are in Ohio and Iowa and these smaller places in the Midwest. But yeah, I totally agree. So what do you plan on growing that business, like buying out other KFC, Taco Bell franchisees that meet your small town criteria and own the real estate, all that?
I'm sure we will in time. Our last acquisition was December 2020 when we bought the Augusta market for KFC. But we'll be opportunistic. Today, as interest rates have risen, that's a very capital-intensive business, which really brings me to my interest in rolling suds, because there are services businesses, kind of as you spoke at the top of this broadcast, there are services businesses that aren't as capital-intensive. And in today's high interest rate market, tighter lending, I could see myself and those that I work with leaning towards those investments that fit that criteria. And one of them is services and how, yes, completely different than restaurants, but at the same time, it's about leading people to do great things.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. So Rolling Suds going to be the nation's first and probably largest power washing company, specialized in residential, also does commercial. So obviously outside of kind of the food, kind of lane you've been in. So like, what did you like about that model? Like why make an investment in it?
Yeah, I think any investment, I try to look at three things. What is the macro environment? We talked about that briefly. What is the thesis of this business, and does the world even need this business?
Yep.
And then third is the people. So first, with respect to the macro environment, as I said, I believe franchising today, the service industry, should be a sector that potential franchisees should be looking at. There's a bigger marketplace, so I think there's some wins to the back on the macro. I also am a significant user of power washing services with 39 KFC and Taco Bells, where we have that done every quarter.
Okay, so the outsides of the building, and the drive-through, and
correct.
Okay,
so we have that done frequently. So what I also liked about the thesis was the ability to have commercial services that are repeat. I love seeing where the cost of acquisition of a consumer or a business, right, is far exceeded by what is the value of that, the lifetime value of that customer. So in the commercial space around power washing, that can be very true. I know as a user, it's not something we're going to go bid out every quarter. If someone does it really right, they're going to have that business for a long time.
Yep.
So I like that aspect of the business. I like that it can be supplemented with residential, but believe that hand in hand can do well. I think it's an industry that's incredibly fragmented and needs to be professionalized. And so I thought Rolling Suds had the processes to do that. And then finally, it's about the people. I had the opportunity to meet Aaron Harper, who's the founder of the franchise side of Rolling Suds and the co-founder of Rolling Suds. Believed in Aaron very much and his vision. I believe that he knows and understands what responsible franchising is, and that it is not just taking people's money, but it is changing lives of franchisees and having a business model that can do it. And so we were aligned on all those aspects. I took an investment. I then re-upped into additional investment in the last month. And I will re-up some more if Aaron will ever sell me more of that franchisor, because I really believe in what he's doing. He's off to a great start. And I believe it's a brand that's going to make a difference. And we'll look back, 5 years from now and say, wow, that was really a great run.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've had Aaron on a few times. We just talked about responsible franchising, and I know it's a big deal to him, and kind of really putting a brand that puts, franchisees first and franchisee profitability. And, I think they truly care about seeing people succeed, and not just, hit numbers or, whatever the goal is. So, you're on the board of multiple franchisors. I'm sure you've got other kind of investments in other franchisors. So what are the qualities that you're looking for? I mean, you mentioned those people. Any other things that you kind of look in terms of like, I don't know, when you're doing due diligence to say, hey, do I want to like stick my name on this thing? Like, are these guys worth my time?
Yeah. So really two ways in which I get some board work opportunities. I guess for lack of a better term, made a name of doing some turnarounds. So there's a number of private equity firms that call me.
Okay.
When they have investments that might be distressed, or if they have new investments into growth opportunities. So I do a fair amount of work for private equity firms. On those cases, I want to understand what their alignment is to the brand, what their thesis is. And if I can align with that, whether that's time frame hold, where they're taking the brand, is it a right turn to the brand? Are we just making the brand better? What are we doing?
Yep.
I always want to seek alignment with ownership. Other areas that I get involved in are when I actually co-invest, kind of like Rolling Suds, and therefore join the board. Along with my capital, I put intellectual capital to work. And try to further leverage that. In those cases, again, want to align with people, just as we talked about with Aaron, and align with the mission of what the brand is. I think one of my first screens under either scenario is, and it sounds so simple, but I just ask myself, does the world really need 300 of these? Like if the world doesn't need 300 Midases, 300 KFCs, 300 Rolling Suds, then possibly the world's moved on. We've all seen those type of brands that have deteriorated and don't have a reason to exist. I think there are many great brands out there that have a reason to exist, that possibly the consumer's belief in that have deteriorated. Probably one of the most successful in the food area in recent years has been Arby's, where Paul Brown came in from Hilton, created the Arby's We Have the Meats campaign. And that business really just soared. It revitalized the brand. That cash flow then allowed them to do a lot of remodeling, which further revitalized the brand. And they did some great things. That's an example of a brand that maybe had deteriorated. There are other brands that, are quite embryo in that they might have less than 50 units. And they've just never had the right capital, and the capital being financial capital or intellectual capital to make them grow. And in my business called Franworth that I have with John Rachi, we try to dig in the rubble of finding those type of brands and see if we can bring them in and grow them quickly. Because there are a lot of great brands out there that just have growth laying in them. They just haven't achieved it.
Okay. What are some of the Franworth brands? you're working
Yeah,
with
the
now?
one that's probably best known would be Lash Lounge, women's
Okay.
eyelash extensions. We've done a fair amount of health and beauty there, but Lash Lounge, we partnered with Anna Phillips, the founder, and then grew that to over 130 units, and it's gone quite well. Our most recent one that's getting quite a bit of traction is the Milkshake Factory,
Yep.
where we partnered with a family out of Pittsburgh, and they had never been into franchising. They had 8 wonderful units in the Pittsburgh area. All they sell principally is milkshakes. They can do it faster, better, quicker than anyone else. And so we've partnered with them and are growing that out. But we have some other great brands as well, like Health Source Chiropractic, which is the number 2 chiropractic franchise next to The Joint. And so we're really pleased with the entrepreneurs that we partner with at Franworth.
Okay. So when you get that call from a private equity company to say, hey, is it like a year kind of position where, hey, we want to bring you on for the next year? Do you have a certain time commitment? And then for you, like how much time do you know how much do you have to invest in it for you to say, hey, is this going to be a drain on my other things, or hey, I have the capacity to help this? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, typically within the private equity world, they want their board there until exit. And so you never know.
Okay.
That could be 18 months. If it's just a quick debt turnaround, generally I would say it's a typical private equity hold that's somewhere between 3 and 6 years.
Okay.
So there is a commitment because oftentimes the incentives to a board are around equity and or growing value, right?
Yep.
That's our job as a board, is to work with management to grow value. And so we participate in that value creation. So if somebody like myself isn't going to be there till the end of the trip, you might as well not.
So you're getting like advisory shares that you're cashing in when they sell, but up to that point, you get like almost no compensation.
So there's no reason to get on the bus unless you're going to take.
Unless you really believe, hey, this thing I can help double, triple, whatever. Then it's worth my time. Interesting. Yeah. What do you see from an industry standpoint? What are some of the biggest challenges that you see like franchisees and franchisors facing kind of now and into the future?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge is uncertainty. And that uncertainty I would break into several buckets. One would be political and legal uncertainty. Yeah. The other would be economic uncertainty. And so on the political, legal, clearly we have swung quite a bit politically
to the left,
over the years, and left or right. I mean, we just tend to swing back and forth. I don't think either one of those, I tend to be a middle of the road guy. I don't think either one of those is necessarily helpful for business. I think business needs certainty. If you give me the rules of the game, I can play and I can determine what my risk is and I can mitigate it. The issue is around changing rules. Most importantly, within that context would be joint employer, which for those listeners who might not know about it, is in essence the rule of who is the employer. Is the franchisor ultimately the employer, or is the franchisee who pays that paycheck the employee? I think Brian would probably agree with me. Those of us that actually sign paychecks, that we're the employer. But there's been some confusion, shall we say, in Washington, D.C. as to what that means. And that creates a strain on the franchisor-franchisee relationship and how far training can go or how far other business advice can go. I won't bore the listeners with that today, but that all creates uncertainty is why I mentioned it. With respect to economic, as interest rates have risen, that has created uncertainty. I think we keep hearing of the recession that's going to come. We haven't seen it. As a result, that creates uncertainty and an overhang. And I would say the last uncertainty that is hit a lot of us hard between 2020 and 23 was just employment. Where am I getting employees? Where did they all go? And do they want to come back to work, and at what rates? The biggest headwind to me is uncertainty. the biggest tailwind is just my belief in the business model of franchising, my belief in America that we will do great things in this country. We tend to, at times, I think, as a country, get in our own way. But if we can get out of our own way and just let business run, I think business, and certainly in franchising, can do great things.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree on all those points. And especially now, employer-employee relationships and minimum wage being set, targeted at what franchisors in California. And I don't know, there's all these things that it's got the attention, but then it changes. A couple of years from now, it could go back the other way. So it's that is the frustrating part is, and then as the bigger you get, right, like the more it impacts us versus someone right. smaller.
You certainly feel like you have a bigger target on your back.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, well, one final question before we go. Domino's China, like 30 seconds. What does Domino's China look like for someone in the US versus there? Like you said, the product's different a little bit earlier. Like what's the product look like and what's kind of the environment over there?
Yeah. It's interesting. Everyone thinks that the environment to operate business in China might somehow be shady or different. And I don't find that at all. I find it very transparent, open. We've had the blessing of just a great management team that's really driven this business. Eileen Wang's our CEO, and I'm just so proud of all that she's accomplished over there with her team. I had the opportunity to invest in Domino's China when it had less than 20 units. We have over 750 now or so. We open, as you said, every 36 hours, a new unit. We're opening new territories across China. The actual product, if you walked into China, Domino's, you would see more technology than you would in the US probably. Just there's technology kind of everywhere, from the holding cabinets to how customers pick up their pizzas to the drivers. Everything is very technology based. But generally, if you looked at the footprint of what that building looks like or that unit, it would look very similar to the US. Oddly, though, Shanghai, for instance, has 22 million people. The city of New York's 12 million. So to give you a sense of the density, our people that we're delivering to, we always say, are right above us. The density. So we have no car delivery, right? It's all electric, bike.
Or elevator, you just go up.
Or elevator, yes. And then finally, the difference you would see is in the product. Our products tend to be smaller size, more individual size type pizzas, and they are signature pizzas. So in the U.S., Brian, when you order, you know what you order. I don't know what your family orders, but
I like a meat lovers pizza with a bunch, pepperoni, sausage, meatball, whatever, like something like that.
Well, you know what it is.
Yeah.
That has not been baked into the psyche of the Chinese public.
Okay.
And so they look at our menu and they don't say, oh, I'm going to have pepperoni, half mushroom, half something else. You don't get as much customization, so you get signature. And then of the top 10 pizzas we sell, I believe 8 of them are seafood pizzas. So crawfish, cod, shrimp, any type of seafood. Tends to be the protein more than sausage or pepperoni. And then finally, one of our top selling pizzas is the best selling pizza in Korea that we brought over, which is in essence pizza dough with mashed potatoes, scrambled eggs, and a sweet sauce across the top of it, which would not appeal to the average American, but does quite well over there. So it's fun to operate a business model that I've operated in the U.S. many times, restaurants, but do so in a foreign culture that I get to learn at the same time that I'm being able to educate. And so that's quite exciting for me personally.
You have pretty good ownership in that?
No, look, it's very small. We took that company public in May.
Oh, it's public now. Okay. All
right. It has a valuation that's approaching $1 billion. And so, my ownership is incredibly small in that, but still meaningful to David Barr.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. How big could it be? Like how? many units?
Domino's US believes that we can be 10,000 units, which would be more units than there are in the US.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people say, yeah, but how could they afford it? Well, you have 330 million people in the US, right? You have 1.5 billion in China.
Yep.
Over 350 million of those are middle class or higher. So the addressable market is bigger than the US. If you think of not only what's in middle class today and can afford pizza in China, but if you think of all those that are coming into the middle class of the remaining 1.2 billion people.
Yep. That's awesome. And operationally, is it similar to the US in how they, the orgs chart to run a 750 unit business?
Almost exactly the same.
Yep. And it just keeps duplicating in levels as you expand and the hierarchy, right, as you grow.
Correct. Almost exactly the same across the board.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, David, for coming on and sharing your story. Super impressive career and legend, as I said. So I appreciate the stories and spending the time with me.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. And best wishes to you.
Thank you.
That's all we got for this episode with the Business with Peers podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other new potential listeners is to rate the show and leave a comment in iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on your preferred social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find all my links at brianbeers.com. Please just share the podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. And until next time, remember to take the actions others won't, to live the life that others don't.